Here's something wild. Europe is sitting on $210 billion of frozen Russian assets. They're desperate to use it, but their own central bank is screaming, absolutely not. And the reason why? It could trigger 50 years of legal warfare and destroy the euro itself. Let me explain how we got here. The Russia-Ukraine conflict has reached a critical financial breaking point, and it's not playing out the way you'd think. The United States? They're basically done. Europe? They're broke but doubling down. And caught in the middle of all this chaos is $300 billion in frozen Russian assets that everyone wants a piece of. This isn't just about one war anymore. This is about the future of international finance, and the decisions being made right now will echo for decades. Let's start with the uncomfortable truth. America cannot afford to fight on multiple fronts. Whether it's actual military conflict or economic warfare, the money just isn't there. Look at the numbers. In Q4 of last year, the US sent $27 billion to Ukraine. By Q1 this year, that dropped to just $500 million. And in Q2, zero. The tap has been turned off. Trump has made it crystal clear. Every dollar spent on this conflict is a dollar not spent rebuilding America's fractured supply chains, funding the AI arms race with China, or fixing the country's crumbling infrastructure. The U.S. fiscal situation is a disaster waiting to happen. In the first half of 2025 alone, they borrowed nearly $990 billion. Next year, during the same period, they're projecting $1.15 trillion in borrowing. That's $158 billion more. Even with record tariff revenue pouring in, the gravy train has left the station, and it's not coming back. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Europe is in full panic mode. They've frozen about $210 billion worth of Russian assets since 2022, and they're supposed to be custodians of that money, not owners, custodians. Think about what that means. One day peace will happen. Russia will come knocking, demanding their money back. It could even be one of the terms of a peace deal, and if Europe doesn't have it, international embarrassment doesn't even begin to cover it. That's why the EU Commission did something absolutely insane. They asked the ECB to provide a €140 billion backstop. Essentially, they wanted the central bank to be the lender of last resort, just in case they blow through Russia's money and need to pay it back later. The ECB looked at this request and basically said, "Are you out of your minds?" And honestly, the ECB made the right call. Listen to what they said. Using these reserves would result in high inflation, but more importantly, it would destroy central bank credibility. Christine Lagarde put it bluntly, "We will do everything we can, but we will not violate the treaty. We have to respect the Treaty of Europe in relation to the functioning of the European Central Bank." The ECB can see what's coming. Russia's top banker has already warned that seizing these assets could trigger 50 years of litigation. Imagine Russia suing everyone: Euroclear, the ECB, the Bank of France, individual EU countries. A never-ending legal nightmare. But here's the real danger. It's not just bad PR. Think about this from China's perspective, or Saudi Arabia's, or any other major economy watching this unfold. If the EU can just seize assets when it's politically convenient, suddenly EU bonds become radioactive. Your money could be confiscated next. Why would anyone buy European debt knowing that? And we're already seeing the consequences. Despite the ECB cutting rates, long-term bond yields in Germany and France are climbing. The entire bloc is trying to raise money, and borrowing costs in the real economy are skyrocketing. Countries that buy EU bonds typically store them in the Euroclear system, which means they're exposed to another Russia II situation. The risk is real, and investors are pricing it in. But wait, it gets worse. Europe's trade surplus with the US is collapsing. Q2 and Q3 numbers show the surplus is shrinking fast. Demand for European manufactured goods and chemicals is plunging. Meanwhile, they're still buying expensive energy from the US, while China eats their lunch in global exports. How bad is it? France is literally begging Beijing for money. Macron is pleading with President Xi to shrink the trade gap by increasing Chinese direct investment in France. Let me repeat that. France is begging China for money. Germany's in crisis. France is broke. Multiple EU countries are facing industrial collapse because of this war. They're selling less, importing more, and they simply cannot issue more sovereign debt without blowing up their bond markets entirely. That's why they're so desperate to use Russia's frozen assets. It's not Plan B anymore. It's the only plan. Now, do you think Russia is just going to sit back and take this? Dmitry Medvedev has already called using the frozen assets tantamount to war. Russia's foreign ministry has warned of the harshest response possible, and they're not bluffing. Russia already drafted a retaliation plan last year to seize Western assets, and they've already started executing it. Remember Carlsberg? Their operations were seized and put under temporary management before being sold off. Here's the scary part. Many EU companies are still operating inside Russia because the money is too good to walk away from. EU banks like Raiffeisen have over 10% of their assets in Russia. They've already been fined $2 billion, but Putin could reach in and take much more. Food companies, apparel brands, chemical manufacturers, energy firms, consumer goods companies, they're all still there, selling to Russian customers. Every single one is a potential target for retaliation. Putin could even declare a debt jubilee and cancel all obligations Russian companies owe to EU banks. Is that a form of seizure? In this economic war, the answer is yes. So what's the EU's solution to all this? Ursula von der Leyen has come up with what might be the most convoluted financial scheme I've ever heard, a reparations loan. Here's how it works. Take the frozen Russian cash, give it to Ukraine as a loan, and Ukraine only has to pay it back if and when Russia pays reparations. Read that again. It's essentially a glorified payday loan that doesn't need to be paid back. Von der Leyen explained it like this. We're taking the cash balances, we're providing them to Ukraine as a loan, and Ukraine has to pay back this loan if and when Russia is paying reparations. The plan is so ridiculous that honestly, Europe would be better off just printing money for Ukraine. Less complicated, and weirdly enough, probably less damaging to their reputation. Here's the kicker. Even the United States is opposing this EU loan scheme. Reports indicate the US is actively lobbying EU countries to block plans to use the frozen Russian assets. Why? Because Trump wants an end to this conflict, and he's willing to give Russia major concessions to make it happen. Financially, America is done with this war, but there's another reason. The US wants the Russian money for themselves. Trump's 28-point peace plan includes using $100 billion of the frozen assets to rebuild Ukraine, with the US taking 50% of the profits. The remainder goes into a US-Russia investment vehicle for joint projects in Pacific areas, probably rare earth supply chains. If Europe issues the loan backed by Russian money, how does the US get the entire pie? That's the real question. This situation is an absolute mess. Trump wants the money to rebuild US industries. Europe wants the money to fight Russia. And Moscow? Deep down, I think they've already accepted they're never getting it back. What happens next will be a global collapse in trust. The international financial system is built on the idea that assets held in custody are safe, that central banks are independent, that sovereign debt is secure. All of that is being thrown out the window in real time. The EU is cornered. The ECB is trying to hold the line. Russia is preparing to retaliate, and the US is looking out for itself. One thing is certain. Whatever decision gets made about these frozen assets will reshape the global financial order for decades to come. So let me ask you, will the EU really use the Russian reserves? How will Putin retaliate, and what does this mean for the future of international finance? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown valuable, hit that subscribe button because this story is far from over. Stay safe out there,